Sunday school teacher, I'm thankful that you have joined us for a time of study and preparation. I'm Tim Smith with Sunday School University, and we're working on the lesson for Sunday, September 21st. We're continuing in our study in the Old Testament book of Numbers. The title of this lesson is The Land. We're going to be in Numbers chapter 13, verses 17 through 31. The point of this lesson is that God requires obedient faith in the face of fear. Today's session will focus on the account when the Israelites were on the edge of the Promised Land, but their fears led the people to be disobedient to the direct command of God. One of the major themes of the book of Numbers is the rebellion against God and the rebellion against God's leader, Moses. This week's session focuses on the rebellion regarding the land that God had promised to give the Israelites' forefathers all the way back to Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. This was a promise, and promise that they had heard for generations. In verses 1 and 2 of chapter 13, God directed Moses to send out one leader from each of the ancestral tribes on this special mission. And then you can see all those who are listed that went out. But we're going to pick up in verse 17, and there we see the task outlined. Verses 17 through 20. When Moses sent them out to scout out the land of Canaan, he told them, "Go up this way to the Negev, then go up into the hill country. See what the land is like, and whether the people who live there are strong or weak, few or many. Is the land they live in good or bad? Are the cities they live in encampments or fortifications? Is the land fertile or unproductive? Are there trees in it or not? Be courageous, bring back some fruit from the land." It was the season for the first ripe grapes. So here in verse 17, we see the task outline. Canaan describes the land that lay between the Mediterranean Sea and the Jordan River. The Negev that Moses mentions here is dry land. It's a very dry region in the southern part of Canaan. And then the hill country that is mentioned is the elevated ridge of hills between the Mediterranean Sea and the Jordan River. In verse 20, Moses set forth a series of questions to which the scouts were to find answers. God's promise to Moses and the Israelites was that Canaan was a good land flowing with milk and honey. The scouts were charged with confirming that the land was in fact flowing with milk and honey. Their job was not a yes or no. It was observation. Not tell us if, but tell us how. The statement there in verse 20 of the first ripe grapes pinpoints the time frame for this reconnaissance mission as late summer, early fall. And then we see verses 21 through 25, the land being assessed. So they went up and they scouted out the land from the wilderness of Zin as far as Rehob, near the encampment of Hamath. They went up through the Negev, came to Hebron, where Ammon, Sheshai were living. These were, and Telmah, the descendants of Anak, they were living there. Hebron was built 7 years before Zon in Egypt. When they came to the valley of Eshcol, they cut down a branch with a single cluster of grapes, which was carried on a pole by 2 men. They also took some pomegranates and figs, and that place was called the Valley of Eshcol because of the cluster of grapes that the Israelites cut there. At the end of 40 days, they returned from their scouting mission. They explored the land. Verse 21, they explored the land, the wilderness of Zin to Rehob. The 12 scouts departed this region stretching from Kadesh Barnea near the Dead Sea, going northward. In verse 21, the narrative of travels of the 12 singled out the major city of Hebron. The word Anak there is translated long necks or strong neck, basically saying that these were very tall men, giants. Zoan, that is mentioned here, was the capital of Egypt, was a prominent city in Egypt. It was the capital city for about 400 years, 1000 to 600 BC. But it was an ancient community, and so it's comparing the two and saying this city that we're looking at it's been there for a while, and it's a major city. Here in verses 23 and 24, again the pomegranates, which is a major symbol in Israel even today, the figs, and the huge cluster of grapes shows how productive the area was. In verse 25, they came back home after 40 days. The term 40 days frequently appears in the Bible and is connected with significant events. This scouting mission would have covered about 500 miles, meaning that they covered about 10 to 12 miles a day. Verse 26 through 31, there we get the decision. The men went back to Moses and Aaron and the entire Israelite company in the wilderness Paran at Kadesh. They brought back a report for them and the whole community, and they showed them the fruit of the land. Verse 27, they reported to Moses, "We went into the land where you sent us. Indeed, it is flowing with milk and honey. Here is some of its fruit." Verse 28, however, the people living in the land are strong, and the cities are large and fortified. We also saw the descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites are living in the land of the Negev. The Hittites, the Jebusites, the Amorites live in the hill country, and the Canaanites live by the sea along the Jordan. Then Caleb quieted the people and said, "Let's go up now and take possession of the land, because we can certainly conquer it." But the men who had gone up with him responded, "We can't attack the people because they are stronger than we are." Verse 26, they reported back to Moses about the land and how fruitful it was, and yes, it was a land flowing with milk and honey. Verse 27, the scouts confirmed that Canaan was that promised land that God had talked about to them. And yes, it's good land. Verse 28, they recounted that the cities were fortified with strong people living there. These 10 scouts saw a major problem that outweighed the benefits of the bounty of the land. Yes, this is great land. Yes, God promised it to us, but we can't touch it. We can't do it. We can't do anything. These cities are full of strong people, and their walls are fortified. It's going to make it difficult, if not impossible, for us to take these places. To reinforce, in verse 29, to reinforce their negative assessment, they began to list all the foes in the land that the Israelites would face. The Amalekites, these were the descendants of Esau, and these were the people who lived a nomadic life in the wilderness of the northwestern section of the Sinai Peninsula, and also the Negev and that area. The Jebusites, these were the original inhabitants of Jerusalem, and it was originally called Jebus. The Israelites waged war against the Jebusites throughout the years, but never fully drove them out. So yes, they were a formidable foe. The Amorites, perhaps the most formidable foe for the Israelites, originally from Syria. They were semi-nomadic. They migrated from Mesopotamia into Canaan beginning around 2000 BC. And the Canaanites, this is the region connected to the sea, the coastal plains along the Jordan River. They were saying, we can't beat these people. But Caleb said, hey, we should go and take possession of this land. Yeah, we're going to be able to conquer it because God's told us to. But the scouts disagree and led the people in rebellion. So as you teach this lesson, what are the summary? What's the summary of these verses? Number one, believers can depend on God to instruct them in the task that He has for them. God's given us a task. He's going to help us do it. He is going to make it possible. Number two, obedience to God includes understanding what He's calling us to do. He's said, hey, take the promised land. Be obedient. When God's called you to do something, do it. Number three, believers can face obstacles with faith, knowing that God is with them. This was not an empty land. But God said it's yours. There's an obstacle. Well, God's said go. We need to trust Him to overcome the obstacles. So as you're creating interest, here's a question, a discussion. What was the last project you had that was more complicated than you thought it would be? Every project I take on gets complicated. How do you handle it when it gets complicated? And then also, how do you respond when things get complicated? I get frustrated very easy. And then you teach this lesson, the body of it, go over the Scripture, but the application. What new ministry opportunity has the Lord put in front of our group? What ministry opportunity? What actions can we take to begin that ministry? Also, what steps do you need to take to move closer to beginning an undertaking? In other words, God's called you to something. God said, here's something you need to do. What is it you need to do to move closer to beginning that? What will you do this week to move forward? Again, the title of this lesson is The Land. The people were right on the edge. They became afraid and disobedient. The point of the lesson, point of these scriptures is that God requires obedient faith, even in the face of fear. Well, I'll be praying for you as you teach this coming Sunday. God bless you.